That day, Noah coldly announced our divorce, saying he had a new family. I still vividly remember that moment. His lover Karen nodded beside him in agreement, and they both seemed completely indifferent to our feelings. In the stroller, their twin babies slept peacefully, completely unaware of the tension filling the room. My mind wandered back to when Jessica was born, and how useless Noah had been as a father. Though he managed to save money for Jessica's college fund, he never truly fulfilled his role as a father. And now here he was, selfishly building a new family without any consideration for Jessica or me. As these bitter thoughts swirled through my mind, Jessica, clearly irritated, asked Noah if he wasn't watching the TV. That's when Noah let out a cry that would change everything. I am Olivia, a housewife in my 50s. This is my story of being betrayed and how I found my new life. Back then, I lived with my husband Noah and our daughter Jessica. Our story began at the company where I started working after graduating from college. I was a nervous fresh graduate when Noah first approached me, telling me not to hesitate to ask questions. Despite having an assigned mentor, Noah took special interest in helping me adjust. Being new to the workforce, I struggled with workplace communication. Noah patiently taught me everything, encouraging me to ask more questions. As we spent more time together, our relationship quickly grew closer. Eventually, Noah confessed he was attracted to my serious attitude toward work and asked me to date him. Despite my initial hesitation, I found myself falling for him. We dated for several years before getting married. We were blessed with our wonderful daughter Jessica, but our marriage was far from a happy one. In fact, most days were filled with pain that I couldn't share with anyone. One of the main sources of this pain was Noah's infidelity. It happened when I was pregnant with Jessica, a time when I needed him most. Until then, Noah had treated me with such care and consideration that I never imagined he could betray me. When I told Noah about my pregnancy, he cried tears of joy and thanked me profusely. However, my morning sickness was severe, making me nauseated just from the smell of food, and household chores became nearly impossible. After our marriage, Noah had suggested I become a full-time housewife. Since he was on the verge of a promotion at that time, I accepted his proposal. Though I felt it was my duty as a housewife to handle the household chores, cooking during morning sickness was pure torture. Feeling guilty, I mustered up the courage to ask Noah if we could rely on takeout and dining out for a while. I carried a heavy burden of guilt for not being able to fulfill what I believed were my responsibilities. One evening, while Noah was resting in the living room, I nervously approached him with my request, only to be met with a frown and harsh words. He coldly reminded me that as a housewife who wasn't working, I had to at least manage the housework. There was some truth to his words. I understood that since I was living on his income, handling household duties was a fair exchange. Yet, completing these tasks was simply beyond my physical capabilities. It wasn't laziness, the morning sickness was debilitating me. I desperately tried to explain how the mere smell of food made me nauseous, and how my growing belly made other chores exhausting. Noah cut me off, dismissing my explanation as excuses, insisting that housework was my duty as a stay-at-home wife. He cruelly added that my job was to prepare nutritious, loving meals to welcome him home, questioning what would happen to his health with such a diet. His cold words left me stunned and helpless. While I hadn't expected daily assistance, I thought he might help on weekends at least. But no matter how I tried to convey my struggles, Noah refused to listen. I endured through the morning sickness and the weight of pregnancy, doing whatever housework I could manage. Those days were hellish, but when Jessica was born, I felt relief thinking the difficult times were finally over. My heart swelled with emotion seeing Jessica cry in the delivery room. Yet Noah, claiming work commitments, didn't even come to the hospital, let alone attend the birth. Though the nurses seemed puzzled by his absence, all my negative feelings vanished when I held Jessica. In that moment, I made a silent vow to protect her forever. I was determined to ensure she would live a comfortable life, no matter what. As expected, Noah showed no interest in participating in childcare. To save money for Jessica's expenses, I decided to start working from home while sending her to daycare. When I discussed this with Noah, he mockingly dismissed my plan. He sneered that someone like me without skills would barely make any money, but told me to do as I pleased. His dismissive attitude and lack of interest in my work irritated me deeply, yet I channeled that frustration into determination to succeed. Weekends were always the same. Noah would just lounge in the living room. Jessica would occasionally ask him to play with her, her sweet voice calling out, "Papa, let's play together." If it had been me, I would have jumped at the chance to play with her, but Noah would grumpily refuse. He would hastily put on his clothes and leave the house, telling Jessica he was too busy to play and to go play with Mama instead. Looking back now, I realize he had been going out more frequently, not just on weekends, but weekdays too, coming home later and later. When I checked his schedule, there were no signs of overtime work. His company wasn't the type to demand unpaid overtime, which led me to suspect he was having an affair. As soon as that thought crossed my mind, I hired a private investigator. Just as I had feared, the investigation revealed Noah was indeed involved with another woman. My heart filled with rage. How could he do this to us when we had a child? It was unforgivable for a father. In my anger, I immediately confronted Noah with divorce papers. He begged me not to divorce him, asking what would happen to Jessica growing up without a father at such a young age. To be honest, I worried about that too. If we divorced then, Jessica would be raised by a single parent. Even if it didn't affect her personality, she might face teasing at school. Still, this wasn't enough to contain my anger. I was certain I would eventually divorce him. But what changed my mind was Jessica's sleep-talking. "Papa, let's play together," she mumbled in her small voice, deep in sleep. Since Noah's affair had come to light, our home had been filled with a heavy atmosphere. Jessica must have sensed this tension. Yet this innocent child still yearned for her father. Her pure innocence brought endless tears to my eyes, and I blamed myself for letting my anger nearly take her father away from her. I decided to postpone the divorce until Jessica no longer needed her father in her life. Instead, I demanded higher than usual compensation from the other woman and set a condition that Noah must spend time with Jessica once a week. In the end, Noah paid the compensation that should have been paid by that woman. But I didn't care about the money anymore. All that mattered was that I had managed to get some justice from both of them. Noah kept his promise to play with Jessica once a week at first, but this arrangement didn't last long. I wanted to confront him about breaking his promise, but I hesitated, fearing that bringing up the past would only cause Jessica more pain. Our relationship had somewhat mended, and we had stopped arguing almost daily. As time passed, we reached our 50s. Jessica had grown up, started working after turning 20, and became independent. Meanwhile, Noah had been on an overseas assignment for 3 years, during which I lived alone in our house. Jessica, worried about my health, decided to continue living with me even after she started working. Since Noah's assignment began, he rarely came home, and his presence naturally faded from our lives. That day, Jessica was on vacation, and we were relaxing at home. Suddenly, a young blonde woman appeared, pushing a stroller. At first glance, she looked only slightly older than Jessica. In the stroller, twin babies slept peacefully, completely unaware of what was happening around them. With a mix of tension and curiosity, I opened the door and let her in. The young woman introduced herself as Karen, Noah's girlfriend, in a tone that left me stunned. This man had betrayed his family not once, but twice. The fact that he was with a woman barely older than our daughter made my stomach churn with disgust. Seeing me speechless, Noah must have thought I was angry, as he put on a shallow smile and announced his plans for divorce and our eviction, declaring he wouldn't pay child support anymore. Karen made a playful comment about how cruel Noah was, which seemed to please him. They both smiled at me mockingly. While the children in the stroller continued sleeping peacefully, their innocent faces reminded me of Jessica's dream from years ago. Jessica, who had been quietly observing, suddenly pointed at the TV and asked Noah if he hadn't been watching it. The news feature on the screen displayed a headline about a female CEO's rapid success, with rumors of her earning $50 million annually. Noah's face turned pale at the sight, and Karen, who had been excited moments before, desperately tried to smooth things over. Karen tried to defend Noah, saying that while he might not earn $50 million, he was a department head with his next promotion already decided. I couldn't help but laugh out loud, revealing that Noah had been lying to Karen about his position. He was just a regular employee, not a department head at all. The truth was, Noah had been on the verge of promotion around the time we got married. However, he lost that opportunity when he embezzled company funds. Though the amount was small, embezzlement was still a crime. I had desperately apologized to his company's CEO, my father's childhood friend, and used my savings to repay the embezzled funds to save Noah from being fired. After that incident, he was never allowed to receive a promotion again. I had tried so hard to help him, but in the end, it all felt like a waste. Karen's face turned pale upon hearing this, and she exploded in anger. She screamed in disbelief, saying she never would have gotten involved if she had known he was just a regular employee. Noah, with tears in his eyes, begged for understanding, claiming he just wanted her approval. The scene was pathetically painful to watch. Honestly, chaos seemed like an understatement for the situation unfolding before us. Amidst this commotion, Jessica stood up and went to her room. When she returned, she held an envelope and placed its contents on the table. She revealed that she had known about her father's affair all along. Everyone, including myself, was shocked by Jessica's words. She explained that it all started when her friend spotted Noah. He was supposed to be on an overseas assignment, but when her friend showed her the photos, there was no doubt it was Noah. Jessica had immediately hired a private investigator to look into the matter. She had explained the situation to my parents, asked them to cover the investigation costs, and tracked Noah's movements. The investigation, centered around where he had been spotted, revealed mountains of evidence of his infidelity, just as expected. Still, Jessica couldn't bring herself to tell me about it. Jessica explained that she had worried about my health, fearing that knowing about the affair might lead to other women entering our lives. She had decided to watch the situation unfold, protecting me from what she thought could be too much stress at my age. Now, as we sat there, the evidence of Noah's infidelity lay spread across the table in photographs and documents. Noah and Karen's faces turned crimson red at the sight. Jessica continued speaking, her voice filled with years of pent-up disappointment. She declared that her father's actions were despicable, betraying me and selfishly creating a new family elsewhere was unforgivable. With pain in her voice, she added that she barely had any memories of playing with her father, expressing her deep disappointment. I could sense the disgust Jessica could hardly put into words. I too felt that dealing with these people was nothing but a waste of time. Still, I wanted to resolve everything quickly. But to achieve that, I needed to make them take responsibility for their actions. I calmly announced that I would not only demand compensation but also report everything to his company's CEO. Noah's face turned pale once again at my words. He knew his company's CEO is my father's childhood friend. If this matter became public, Noah, with his history of misconduct, would undoubtedly be fired. Karen, with disbelief written all over her face, questioned how I could possibly contact the CEO directly, insisting I was just a former employee without such authority. I smiled and acknowledged that she was right. Normally, a former employee wouldn't have such access. But then I revealed that my father was the CEO's childhood friend. Noah and Karen gasped in shock at this revelation. Noah demanded to know why I had never mentioned this before. I explained matter-of-factly that my father's connection to the CEO had helped me get into the company. However, I quickly clarified that it wasn't just nepotism. Speaking almost to myself, I added that while this connection had helped save Noah when he embezzled company funds, I now realized that effort had been wasted. Noah's face turned from pale to ghostly white. It was understandable. One word from me to the CEO would result in his immediate dismissal. Given his history of misconduct, finding another job would be nearly impossible. Karen screamed, her face red with anger as she grabbed Noah's shirt collar, demanding to know what she was supposed to do now that her dreams of marrying a department head had been shattered. But there was nothing left for her to do anymore. The moment she realized Noah was nothing but a liar, all her hopes had crumbled away. Even as Karen shook him, Noah desperately tried to maintain a smile. He pleaded with her, saying that with the power of love they could overcome anything since they had their family. He kept trying to convince her they could work together to protect their family, but his pathetic words had no effect on Karen. It was clear that Karen had never been interested in Noah himself, only attracted to the wealth she believed he possessed. The likelihood of a young woman like Karen genuinely falling in love with a man over 50 was extremely low. Even if he had taken better care of his appearance, there might have been a slight chance, but Noah looked every bit his age. To be honest, even if I had been younger, I wouldn't have wanted to be with someone like him. Karen burst into tears, crying out in disbelief about the invalid marriage and demanding child support, insisting they were his children. She screamed about his broken promise to marry her. That's when Jessica spoke up. She questioned whether these children were really Noah's. Surprised by her words, I asked what she meant. Jessica pulled out more documents from the envelope. There was still evidence she hadn't shown us yet. When Karen saw the new evidence, she screamed and lunged for the table. In the commotion, a photograph fell to the floor. The photo showed Karen walking with another man in an area known for its hotels. I picked up the photo, exclaiming about her relationship with men other than Noah. Noah's face turned crimson with rage as he snatched the photo from my hands. Staring intently at the photo, he shouted at Karen. Exploding with anger, he demanded to know how Karen could betray him and have relations with other men when he truly loved her. Karen tried to defend herself, but Noah cut her off. He declared he wouldn't acknowledge the children without DNA tests, suspecting they weren't even his. Karen broke down in tears at his words. I was stunned to realize she hadn't just been unfaithful, but had potentially tried to pass another man's children off as Noah's. Her cunning was beyond comprehension. Though Karen was barely older than Jessica, we now had more than enough evidence of her affairs to demand compensation. The relationship between Noah and Karen was beyond repair. Just when I thought the situation was resolved, Noah suddenly collapsed to his knees. When I asked what he was doing, he desperately cried out. He pleaded that he finally realized I was his one and only true love, begging for another chance despite being a poor husband. I coldly replied that if he truly felt that way, he should never have gotten involved with Karen in the first place. His words had lost all power over me. I firmly told him I wouldn't cancel the divorce, that Jessica and I would leave, and that I would mail him the divorce papers to sign and submit. I turned and walked back to my room with resolve. Jessica seemed to understand what needed to be done and headed to her own room. By the time we finished packing, Karen and the children had left, while Noah remained crying alone in the living room. He begged us to reconsider and not leave him alone. We completely ignored his desperate pleas. Jessica and I left together to stay temporarily at a hotel. We decided to move to a new place as soon as we found one. I mailed the divorce papers and consulted a lawyer in case of delays, feeling a great weight lift from my shoulders. While Jessica continued working as usual, she initially offered to help find a new home for me. When she suggested we live together in the new house, I was deeply touched by her kindness. We began spending time together looking for a new place and occasionally going out for fun. With Noah out of our lives, I finally had more time to spend with Jessica. For the first time since my marriage, I could truly enjoy life from my heart. It was a time of pure happiness, unburdened by worries. However, even these peaceful days had new events waiting for us. One weekday, I was at my office, going about my usual routine. After reviewing the day's schedule with my secretary, I had just settled at my desk to start work when my phone began ringing. It was Noah calling. Of course, I never take personal calls during work hours. I had always maintained a strict boundary between my professional and private life, so I ignored his call. But the phone kept ringing persistently, making my irritation grow with each ring. What a nuisance, I thought to myself, deciding to deal with it after work when I returned to the hotel. Checking my call history later, I saw Noah had been calling nonstop since he first tried to reach me. When I finally answered, I heard his desperate cry through the phone. He was begging for help, claiming he was about to lose the house. I couldn't help but sigh at his words. This was exactly what he deserved, I thought to myself. After all, I was the legal owner of that house. To be precise, when we first purchased it, both our names were on the deed. However, when he lost his chance at promotion and clearly couldn't manage the mortgage payments, I had changed the deed to my name only. In fact, I had been the one making all the mortgage payments, while Noah had contributed only a negligible amount. So him losing the house was simply the natural consequence of his actions. Yet he seemed unable to understand this simple fact, just wallowing in confusion. Perhaps I had coddled him too much, I reflected, wondering if things might have been different had I been more direct with him from the start. As my words sank in, Noah seemed to finally remember the past events. With fear evident in his voice, he desperately pleaded with me. He told me he'd been fired by the company, and now he would lose both his home and job, asking how he was supposed to survive. I replied coldly that this wasn't my problem anymore, he would have to figure it out himself. This situation was entirely Noah's own doing. If he hadn't betrayed us, even with an imperfect relationship, we might have managed to stay together as a family. But that had become impossible, and it was completely his fault. Yet despite everything, he refused to acknowledge his mistakes, desperately clinging to what he'd lost. Looking at his pathetic state, I wondered how a man could fall so low, yet I felt no sympathy whatsoever. My feelings for Noah had completely dried up. I calmly informed him that if he delayed submitting the divorce papers, we would go to court, making it even harder for him to find new employment. Then I added a question about his ability to pay the settlement. Noah visibly trembled at my words, swallowing hard. With a touch of sarcasm, I mentioned how his company's CEO seemed angrier than expected, spreading word about Noah everywhere, though I mockingly added that it probably wouldn't matter much since he wasn't exactly a celebrity. Noah desperately begged, saying this would be the end of his life. His desperation was almost comical, and I couldn't help but smile. After all, this was entirely Noah's own doing. I was certain that marrying a man who had betrayed Jessica and me for years had been a mistake from the start. Feeling ashamed of my younger self, I asked him if he couldn't see that he had brought this all upon himself. With that, I hung up the phone. Though he called several more times, I simply blocked his number and sent him my lawyer's contact information. This effectively ended any direct communication between Noah and me. I also told Jessica to block his contact information. I felt deep relief that this matter was finally resolved. What happened next, I learned from my lawyer. While Noah initially hesitated to submit the divorce papers, he quietly complied when informed about the possibility of court proceedings. However, to pay the settlement, he had borrowed a substantial amount from suspicious sources. This desperate measure came after his in-laws had cut ties with him and warned his friends away, leaving him with no one to turn to. Though he managed to pay the settlement, he couldn't repay his loans and was reportedly taken away by some shady characters. I heard he now works on a fishing boat somewhere at sea. Interestingly, Noah had also demanded compensation from Karen, but her parents ended up paying it all. I had thought Karen might have escaped relatively unscathed, but I was wrong. Her parents were furious about the whole affair and took complete control of her finances. Despite her youth, I heard she lost her freedom to use her salary under her parents' control, and even her beauty began to fade. As for the twins, they weren't Noah's children after all. They were now being raised by Karen's parents, whom I met once with my lawyer and found to be quite decent people. I felt confident the twins would grow up well in their care. I secretly breathed a sigh of relief. After everything settled, I continued my quiet life, focusing on my work. Jessica also joined my company as an office worker. Though I never gave her special treatment as her mother, she proved to be an excellent employee, appreciated by everyone. One day, Jessica told me she had something important to tell me. As I worried about potential problems, I noticed a young man standing beside her. Jessica, her cheeks flushed pink, told me she had decided to get married. As a mother, I felt guilty for all the hardships I had put Jessica through. She must have endured so many painful experiences. Yet despite everything, she had grown into such a wonderful woman. When I heard this happiest of news, I couldn't hold back my tears. Jessica pulled out her handkerchief to wipe my tears, telling me to save them for the wedding day. The young man beside her smiled and commented on what a wonderful mother I was. Looking back, there were so many times I wanted to run away from the pain. But having Jessica by my side gave me the strength to overcome it all. I silently vowed to continue being a mother Jessica could be proud of, grateful for their presence in my life. Thank you for listening and sharing in my story. Life truly leads us down unexpected paths. These moments of reflection remind me just how precious they are. I have a question I'd like to ask you all. Have you ever felt life testing you with overwhelming challenges? Have you ever thought, this is impossible to overcome? I've felt this way many times throughout my life. During my marriage to Noah, I spent countless nights questioning how things had become so complicated, wondering if I'd ever see light at the end of the tunnel. Have you ever lost yourself by becoming too deeply immersed in relationships and circumstances? That's exactly what happened to me. When I first met Noah, he appeared charismatic and full of energy. Fresh out of college, I was drawn to his seeming control over everything, dreaming of a bright future together. I truly believed he was the one I could share my life with and build a future together. But as time passed, things began to change. Let me pause my story for a moment. Many of you might relate to this experience. That moment when you start sensing something isn't right in a relationship. When you realize things aren't working out as you'd hoped. Yet you keep moving forward, believing things will get better someday. Have you ever felt that way? That inner voice tells you something's wrong, but you ignore it. You cling to hope, convinced everything will work out fine. I still vividly remember the moment when problems with Noah began. It was when I was pregnant with Jessica. Morning sickness, poor health, and above all, that crushing loneliness. Even with him beside me, I felt completely alone. At some point, he seemed to lose all interest in my feelings and condition. I wonder if any of you have ever felt your loved one stop caring about you. It's such a painful feeling, isn't it? That loneliness of being alone while together. And then, the betrayal. That betrayal cuts deep into your heart. The piercing pain when someone you trusted disappoints you. When I discovered Noah's infidelity, my world seemed to crumble with a deafening crash. I felt completely vulnerable and broken inside. I know I can't be the only one who has gone through such a painful experience. How have you all managed to overcome your partner's betrayal? Are you the type to face such situations head-on? Or do you take time to process and gather your thoughts? For me, it was a long and painful journey. Part of me wanted to confront Noah, express my feelings, and demand explanations. But then there was Jessica to consider. She was innocent, yet caught in the middle of everything. That was the most painful part. Not knowing how my decisions would affect my loved ones, especially my child. Have you ever been caught in a situation where either choice would impact those you love? I questioned myself repeatedly. Was considering divorce the right thing to do? I feared how growing up without a father might affect Jessica. Yet at the same time, I couldn't continue in a relationship that was slowly destroying me. Life presents moments when we must choose between the easy path and the right one. Even when we know which choice is right, making that decision can be incredibly difficult. I ultimately decided to proceed with the divorce, though the path was filled with doubt and fear. Still, deep inside, I knew I needed to be strong. Not just for myself, but for Jessica too. I felt I had to set an example as her mother. I wanted to show her that even in the darkest times, there's always a way out. Looking back now, I understand how crucial that decision was. After all, it's not just about surviving, but truly living. Finding happiness beyond the struggles, that's what really matters. Speaking of happiness, have you ever experienced this feeling? That sense of liberation when you finally let go of something that was hurting you. That moment when you can finally breathe again, like a heavy weight lifting from your shoulders. That's exactly what I felt when I divorced Noah. It wasn't about hatred or resentment, it was about freedom. It was the moment I realized I deserved better and was worthy of pursuing my own happiness. Now, I'd like to talk about the future, especially after overcoming hardships. How do you view your future? Do you feel anxious about the unknown? Or does your heart race with excitement about the new possibilities ahead? For me, the future became an opportunity to rediscover myself and explore new possibilities. It became a time to rebuild my life in the way I truly desired. Jessica was my greatest inspiration throughout this journey. Watching her grow into a strong, independent woman gave me the strength to move forward. Let me ask you another question. What is your source of inspiration? Has there been someone who lit the flame of hope when you needed it most? I believe everyone needs such a presence in their life. Someone to remind us of our strength when we've lost sight of it ourselves. I hope you'll take away the importance of having such people around you. What truly matters is being surrounded by people who genuinely care about you. These are the people who support, encourage, and help you be your best self. As I conclude this reflection, I want to express my gratitude to all of you here. Thank you for listening to my story and sharing your thoughts and experiences. Life isn't easy, but I believe any obstacle can be overcome with proper support and determination to move forward. Don't you think so too? I would love to continue this dialogue. Please share your own stories, challenges, and how you've overcome them. I am here to listen, learn, and support each other. Let's walk this journey of life together. Thank you again for being here. Let's hold on to hope, join forces, and be ready to face whatever the future brings.